Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back once again, to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And today, I think we're going to talk just a little bit, maybe a lot, I don't know, about the upcoming shows that TNA did announce. Now, we did talk about them just a little bit, but I want to focus on the side of this argument, I guess, against doing these shows. Now, they've already made these shows official. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to actually 1,000% happen. Obviously, things do change based on ticket sales and whatnot, all of that sort of stuff. Now, as we know, as I've said, as was reported, in these arenas, or what as we were discussing, how big these arenas are. They are quite big arenas for what TNA has typically done. More recently, they've gotten up to that 3 to 4K mark with some of their shows. I think that Genesis is about 6K arena. I don't think we've quite sold that out quite yet, but we'll still keep working on promoting that event there and trying to get interest in that. But again, it's very hard unless there's actually like matches and things that are kind of on the card for people to start, sort of buying these shows more so. But then again, yes, ringside seats, or most of the ringside seats, are practically sold out. There are a few seats left, but not a huge amount. But most of the seats are just general admission seats that remain for that at the moment. So it does look pretty good, at least for the ringside seats, which, are typically the more expensive of the seats. And typically when they book these shows, they will assume that they will have not a sellout. As I said before, I think it's a big gamble, and I think it's a good gamble in some ways. I don't think it's a bad gamble. I think that the people who are saying, oh, it's a bad gamble and they'll never fill that many... Look, maybe they won't, but never say never in professional wrestling. We've seen that thousands and thousands of times. Now, will they potentially be right that they won't sell these out? Potentially, yes. As I said just then, you can never tell whether, the level of interest and the level of awareness is out there for people to even know that these sorts of events are on. That's why we've got to do as much as what we can to sort of promote those events and to get people interested into going to these shows and sell them out potentially if we can, or at least get as many people in there as possible. Because even again, if a few people start, again, they've started a trend in that positive direction, which is good. If they start trending more and more in that direction, it gets better and better. And it also reaches more and more people, because more and more people will go to these events and go, hey, you know what? It was a really good show. And, everything that, all the negatives and the naysayers and whatever else that, continue to push the old points that are, decades old at this point, don't really have a leg to stand on in that regard. Now, yes, again, it is a big gamble because they haven't seated an arena of that size ever in their history. And that would be a record gate as far as attendances would be concerned for them. But I don't think it's bad if they don't sell these shows out. I think that just the fact that they're rolling the dice, and they're only rolling the dice a couple of times so far this year with these bigger arenas, and they are for their bigger shows. So that seems, escalatory and appropriate for those sorts of shows. So again, potentially they can still, get there somehow with those number of sales. And they've got several months, I believe, to sell for those events. So I believe the sales go on later this month in December. So people have a long time to sort of buy up tickets or save up money for these events, or at least know that they're on. And again, we have a long time to promote those events. So, and again, yes, it is again tough to sell people on an event without a card, but yeah, the momentum that they've kind of had this year has been very, very, very good. And they have done a lot of things that I think, you know, people didn't think that they could do. They've broken every single metric every single time that somebody says, "Oh, they can't do this or they can't do that." They'll never get on TV. They'll they won't be around for more than a week. They won't be around more than a month. They won't be around more than 6 months, etc., etc. Every time somebody said they can't do this or they can't do that, or they will only be around this long, or they'll be dead in a month, or they'll be, they'll go underground, or whatever else it'll be. When people said, "Oh, that's the end of TNA," and blah blah blah, no, it wasn't. Yes, it was a big dip, and it was, nearly the end of the company in many ways. But again, it wasn't. And that is by some amount of chances, some amount of luck, and some amount of many other factors and whatnot. But again, it's just one of those things that it just didn't happen. So we're lucky we live in that world in a number of settings and sentiments and whatnot. Because again, the wrestling industry, in my opinion, is better off for having TNA in it. And again, as I said, I don't think that it would be bad for them to not sell out. I think that if they don't sell these two events out, which they could still sell out, I think Rebellion more likely than Slammiversary, but still, even if they get somewhere near there, it again is just one of those things that maybe for Bound for Glory later in next year, perhaps they will go for another bigger venue that perhaps they won't sell out again, but those will be a very minority of their shows for this year. And, we look at more or less covering your costs as far as if it was worth running these venues. So if they're making the money on these venues and they only did 3 shows or whatever it is that didn't sell out, and they were, pretty big not sell out, like they were missing like 7K people or whatever it was, or 10K people or whatever it was in the arena, okay, well, that didn't matter that much. Realistically, for those 2 or 3 shows, maybe 4 shows, whatever it is, that's not a lot for the whole year, in comparison to AEW, who's been sitting there for the last, 2 years or whatever it's been, not selling out arenas for, 2 years or more, or whatever it's been. It's been ridiculous. Like, yes, they've sold out arenas as well, but they've also not sold out a lot of their shows, for a while. And, again, just saying that we're learning from that, but we've got to say, we've got to take these chances, we've got to take these risks, because we've got to see if people will come, and if we've got to see if people have an interest, and we can get that audience. Now, if we only can max out at, say, 7K or 8K or whatever it is, I don't know what it is, I don't know what number it is, we'll find out at some point, certainly soon, in the next few months or whatever it is. But again, if they see, okay, well, our max is about 7K or something like that, or whatever it is, let's say that, for example, because it's just the first number that came into my head or whatever it was, because they've already got 3K, 4K. So let's just about double that. That seems fair enough, perhaps. That doesn't seem like that's too far. I think that's a lot in a fair bit, but I still feel like that's, it's not, it's not all the way up there, but it's not, triple or quadruple or whatever else. It's double what they've got. Maybe they won't get quite there. Maybe they'll get, a little bit more than that. Maybe they'll get another, 1.5K. But again, if they find that number of people that are willing or able to come to their events, in their 6,000-7,000s or whatever it is, then they know, okay, well, let's just cap ourselves at booking maybe an 8K arena or whatever. And then maybe we'll get one big, if we really push big things into the picture of, like, matches and builds and things like that, maybe we'll fill that out, and maybe we can get there with that. So again, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's just gauging where the audience is, and again, it does depend on how much exposure really these events get. Now, yes, they get a lot more exposure on Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and things like this than they do get on TNA Access TV. But again, it's just one of those things that's how it is. If they, again, we've talked about this a lot. They've even said or had rumblings of people saying, hey, they're looking for a bigger, better deal or something. If they can get that, then great. But we have to wait and see what that is. Or certainly, I feel like they're, as we all say, they're very underrated for what their TV numbers suggest. Easily, they could be up there with Collision, Rampage, a lot of those other shows very easily, I think, in terms of viewership or their peak viewership, because now I think that even like some of those shows are getting like TNA's numbers now, and they're on a much bigger network than what TNA is. It just shows you that there's basically no interest in the fan base there for those shows. Or they have a hardcore audience, and yes, TNA has a hardcore audience, but honestly, TNA and AEW are very different. AEW is much more of a wrestling show, and that's okay. Like, Ring of Honor is even more of a wrestling show, but TNA is more of a variety show. It's not to the level of NXT or what WWE does on Raw or SmackDown, but it is more of a variety show. It has wrestling at its core, and it has storylines around wrestling, but it is a show that gives you a bit of everything. It gives you comedy, it gives you drama, it gives you heartache, it gives you X, Y, and Z. It doesn't just give you wrestling is wrestling is wrestling. That's what I feel like AEW does, and Ring of Honor does. They do, and New Japan, same sort of thing. They do wrestling is wrestling is wrestling, and that's great. I love professional wrestling, no matter what it is. But again, it's just one of those things that I prefer to see something of that sports entertainment sort of style, that more, not gimmicky, but sort of somewhat gimmicky, somewhat style to things, and some of that storytelling that you can sort of see in professional wrestling. I don't want to just see, I don't want to just see a match between two great wrestlers. I want to see a match that's between two great wrestlers that is built up with a story and a purpose and a direction, and somebody, let's say who's on the up and up recently, someone like Leon Slater. Let's take him, because he's like a young guy that I think has a fair amount of potential. One of those young guys like that getting a big win over a superstar of the past or even of the contemporary era, and then getting a bigger position in the company henceforth from that. You've got to invest in your future. It's really tough to invest in your future sometimes when you're these quote-unquote smaller wrestling companies, because it's like, well, we don't know how long we've got somebody, and what if they go to AEW, or what if they go to WWE? We're just feeding people to WWE or AEW. But that's, again, that, false perception of, well, everyone's going to WWE. Not everyone does. It's a false perception of everyone's going to AEW. Well, not everyone is, because, again, people have seen now that, well, it's not so hot over there anymore, and things aren't going as great. And again, I'm not trying to downplay them or try to be so negative on them. If I was an actual person who tried to cover them properly in any kind of format, I'd try to give them their flowers when they're due as well, because they do deserve their flowers where they're due, because they do a great service to the professional wrestling industry and do a lot of great stuff, and they have a lot of great talent. I think that they just need to take a few steps back and kind of go, now what are we doing and why are we doing it and how can we make it better and make it for the fans who watch this product, or make it more accessible, or more, no, not generic, but more appealing to a more mass audience so that we can get more people to watch this show. You've got to be an alternative to WWE, but you've still got to offer a show that has variety, I find. If you don't offer variety, then that's where I find that you fall. And this is the same story for TNA. They have their own faults and their own things that I think that they could work on. And that's the same for any wrestling company, really. It's just that everyone talks about the big two or the big three, realistically, when you're talking about professional wrestling. Or maybe the big four, or whatever your perspective is, because some people still think the New Japan's kind of hanging in there or doing well or whatever. Yes, they certainly have a lot of great stars there and whatnot, but they are continuing to be kind of the outlier in the industry, realistically, because, again, they don't really have that same appeal as what the... again, they're very much a wrestling company. They are much more focused on matches, and yes, there is storytelling there. There's always storytelling there. I'm not saying that these other places don't have storytelling at all. Obviously they do, but again, without some of that other context and without some of that other stuff that sort of adds more layers to it, like promos and that sort of stuff, or, you know, certain segments and certain moments and certain things to, you know, sort of the build-up of things, not just saying, oh, you've got a match with this person. Well, that doesn't really matter, because if you haven't won matches and it doesn't seem like you're a threat, then it's like, well, or maybe you've won one match or something like that, or whatever it is. The audience still feels like, well, you're still in the same position, you've just got a big win here, or whatever it is, just to set you up for this upcoming match. So it doesn't really, you know, equate to anything more. It's not going to change the outcome. You haven't won and won and won and won for weeks and months and whatever else on end. You haven't been building for a while, and this is an incoming thing that really puts you in the same position or in the same realm as this other person. You've won one match here or won one match there, or whatever it is. And so, yes, sometimes they do that here and there on some things, because some things have to be rushed out because you have something in 2 weeks or whatever it is, you know, again. So again, that is one of those things. When you're on a deadline or something like that, I get that you've got to do those sorts of things. But again, that's your own decision-making of saying, let's have this thing 2 weeks after that thing, or whatever it is. Because if you're doing that and saying, oh, yes, we're going to do this in 2 weeks, well, yes, the creative pressure's on there, but now you've only got those 2 weeks to build that up. And then perhaps, like, again, in a few more weeks, you've got another event in, you know, whatever it is. So professional wrestling never ends. But you've always got to be having the next thing sort of locked in the chamber, as I sort of would like to say. You know, you've got to have something else ready for everyone and for everything all the time. You can't be going, oh, well, what are we going to, you know, come to the next set of tapings or whatever it is, and then go, oh, well, what are we going to do now? You know, you've got to start thinking, oh, okay, well, not just what are we going to do now, well, what are we going to do? You know, like if somebody gets injured or somebody gets hot, you've got to start going, oh, no, wait a minute, this person's getting really hot, or this person's, you know, getting really good heat, or whatever it is. You know, again, you've got to start going, okay, let's try to ride this train or try to do something with this or whatever it is. Not just, you know, keep filling in the blanks with, oh, they won one match randomly a few, like last week or whatever it was, and they haven't won a whole match this whole year, or haven't even been featured on TV for months or whatever it has been. again. So it's like, well, obviously you haven't got enough planned in there for them. But again, that happens. It happens sometimes, and that you just can't do anything about it. But again, those are some of those little things that you need to realize are, detrimental or not good or not worth, the fans' attention span, obviously, for a build or for a promo or for a match. They still might be like, oh, well, I might sit here and check it out or whatever. But, I know who's going to win. It'll probably be an all right match. But, when I know who's going to win or whatever, it's really obvious who's going to win. It's like, well, I don't have enough investment in this match. Unless they really go hard in the match, then it's like, well, you're not going to change my mind because, already the setup isn't strong enough for me to suspend my disbelief or whatever it is. And sometimes that needs to be like, well, we have to save these bigger builds or these bigger things for these bigger shows. Fair enough. I understand that too. But again, anyway, I still just, I don't think that it can ever be bad. It's one of those things. Like will they lose money? I don't think they will lose a lot of money in these big shows because again, it's just one of those things. Like the general admission tickets that the back parts of the arena that wouldn't sell out potentially of these arenas would be the lowest amounts paid to the venue or to whatever it is. And in theory, at least, like their t-shirt sales, their drink sales, their hot dog sales, whatever it is, their concession stand sales, their merchandise sales, all of that sort of stuff, their pay-per-view sales, etc., their streams on TNA Plus, etc. Hopefully, all of that will, cover at least, the lack of perhaps selling out, and probably will do, definitely, I think, and I feel like. But even so, like, again, we shouldn't be defeatist. We shouldn't be defeatist and sitting here and saying, oh, well, what if this happens or what if they don't sell out? No, we should be saying, let's get fired up even more and let's prove them wrong. Let's, again and again, we've tried to prove these people wrong, and again and again we have here and there, but we need to prove them wrong. We need to show them, no, we're not just going away, or this just isn't like a one-off or a phase. As I said before, like we sold out every single pay-per-view or every single premium live event that happened this year. That's 12 shows. That's 12 major shows that were all sold out, So, and I don't know whether we can 100% do that next year. And I think like some of the more B shows or whatever can sell out much easier because they're much smaller arenas and whatever else or whatever. But again, like the level of interest for some of those B shows or whatever will be a lot lower. So again, it's sometimes as hard to get people butts in seats as what it is for the bigger shows because again, what am I invested in? So it's really tough to sort of have that, there and to have, things going on like that. So hopefully, we'll get there at some point where, we can see, these shows do well. Like, that's what I mean. Like, let's not just throw in the towel and go, oh, well, these critics, they're saying this and saying that or whatever else, or these haters are saying, no, or people don't believe that they could sell these arenas out. Well, maybe they can't, but we'll never know unless we get out there and try, like if people just always gave up on everything, nothing would ever get done. Like AEW wouldn't be a thing if people had just given up and said, oh, well, we'll never do it because all of these naysayers say we won't do it or whatever. No, same thing with TNA. TNA wouldn't be here if they continued to listen to the naysayers saying, oh, well, they're on a, bad network that no one really watches, and they're going down the toilet, and they'll be out of business soon, blah, 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 blah. If they had have just listened to people saying that sort of stuff, they wouldn't be where they are today and wouldn't have had the revival that they've had. Same thing for WWE. When they've had several bad periods. But when they had the bad period somewhat recently, like in 2015, 16, whatever, that sort of period, and even sort of till recently, until like 2019, 2020, or even after, I think post, like some of the pandemic stuff people will never watch. I think there was some good stuff during that era, but again, like people will probably never watch it because it's just a sort of soulless entity, or it's just, the screens era of WWE. So I don't think people will try to see the highlights of that too much. But again, it's just one of those things. Same with TNA. There was some good stuff there, here and there, but it was the very soulless sort of part of wrestling, and probably no one will ever go back and watch much of that because it's just like very lifeless. Some of like the Funhouse stuff or whatever, that sort of stuff, maybe they'll go back and watch some of that because that's, more entertaining, or that's more interesting, or it breaks up the monotony of just seeing guys wrestling in the ring with no noise because there's no crowd, no fans. But yeah, like again, it certainly won't. These arenas certainly won't be empty. We know that. So even if they have, I don't know, just as much as what they've had recently, which was 4K in some of these arenas, well, they'll have 4K in that arena, and that's not zero. So, and some people will say, oh, that's zero or whatever. It's only 2 people in their dog or whatever it is, and that sort of thing. But, I don't think that would be the final number at all. But again, like, that's probably maybe the worst outcome. And still, that wouldn't be horrible, I don't think. But it would be like not a good indicator in some ways. But again, like at that point, at least okay, well, this is where we're at and this is where we stand. So I think that's the purpose of like this gamble. They're trying to go, we need to know how many people we can get packed into an arena with what we've got and with the distribution that we've got and where we're at and the level of interest that fans actually have. And now maybe some fans turn up on the day, or turn up, because they're, not on holiday, or, they were looking for something to do or something to see or whatever it was. And that's why, again, you've got to be a variety show, because anyone that's not a really hardcore wrestling fan that's coming to these events and these things, I guess they don't really want to see that much wrestling. But again, they understand what it is. They understand it's like UFC, I guess. You're going to see these fights. You're not just going to see, I don't know, an elephant in a circus, playing the trumpet or whatever it is. Maybe you'll see that, I don't know. But again, you shouldn't expect that you're not going to see wrestling, because this is a wrestling show. Like, and the wrestling takes up most of that. But again, you're going to see much, much, much more. You're not going to just see, people sitting there, and not caring, or people, that are just like, mostly walking through the motions or whatever it is, or, again, just matches that are just matches without builds or without reason or without consequences or without stakes. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see these moments, and you're going to hear these promos, and you're going to get to experience some of these things that, what professional wrestling makes magic out of. So, yeah, we've got to keep the train going, and we've got to do our best to try to support the company in these endeavors and get the word out there about these events. And hopefully we can do our best to, shift some of those tickets. And yeah, I hope we can do that, and I hope you guys will follow me or follow whoever else is out there and help shift some of those tickets for TNA, because that's the best thing that we can do is shift tickets for them and shift the perception of, again, like, we should be there. We should, people should give us a chance and should see what we have to offer them, because it's actually a really, really, really good show. Yes, there could be some things that could be better, but still, like, it's really good. And yet, it's not, just doesn't get the views just because it's not on a big enough platform, and basically no one can get that platform and no one really knows about it. They're making lots of noise on that little platform, but again, no one can really hear it. So, yeah. But anyway, guys, hope you have enjoyed this episode and hope you will join me again in another one.